name is Pedro Mora, and I'm bringing to you this time Perpetual Democracy, this time with Seth Klein, the director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Hello, Seth.
Hi, Pedro.
And you have written a report about the provincial budget. So you're alluding that the surplus is actually higher than expected, and there's a reason for it. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, well, every year our organization produces an alternative provincial budget. We call it our BC Solutions budget. But one of the things we've been really noting the last few years is this game that gets played every year by the finance minister, the provincial finance minister. The federal government does the same thing, but they've really made an art of it provincially, which is at budget time, they announce a very modest surplus, maybe 200 million, maybe 400 or 600 million. But then a year later, when the actual budget year closes, it turns out that the surplus is anywhere between $2 billion and $3 billion, much more, many times more than they originally said. In fact, when we looked back at the last 5 years, if you tally up all those differences, they have cumulatively understated their budget situation by over $10 billion. So they've done that year after year, and they just did it again yesterday when they brought down their budget.
Some people might think that that's good to underestimate.
Well, fine. Erring a little bit on the side of caution, you could say there's a virtue in that. This is not erring on the side of caution. This is grossly and systematically understating how much money we have available. And it's a very political thing that they're doing, because what they're doing is it's all about dampening expectations, right? You say we only have this much money available. That means we have to make hard choices, and they repeat the tough choices line all the time. When if they just admitted what revenues were actually likely to come in based on their own economic growth forecasts, we wouldn't actually have to make very many tough choices. We have available in those surpluses enough money to make a dramatic difference. Let me give you one concrete example. If you just took the surplus from the year ending and you said, we're going to take a third of that and use it to build social housing, which is not what they did in yesterday's budget, they could have virtually eliminated homelessness between now and the Olympics. But they choose not to do that.
Well, they claimed that there was some increase in housing. Did they put still some money, some 200 million or something for housing?
The budget that came down yesterday was an incredible snow job and really a deeply cynical exercise. It was dubbed the housing budget, which is all very nice except for the fact that it doesn't actually build any housing. Or virtually no housing.
So where's that money going?
Well, so first of all, they said overall the housing plan is worth $2 billion, but $1.5 billion of that, 3/4 of it, is actually a personal income tax cut, which they've just decided to call part of their housing plan because theoretically people can use some of that money towards their housing. So it's not; it's a tax cut.
But it helps some people. That tax cut helps some people, but I'm hearing that is not the right direction, because the people that really need are not benefiting from it.
Well, it doesn't actually increase the stock of housing. That's what we need. We actually need housing. And just to put some dollars to the tax cut, the average person in British Columbia makes $30,000 a year. The tax cut to them is about $130 a year. That doesn't do much in the way of housing.
And the bottom quintile of population perhaps don't really get any of that benefit.
Well, if you were already low enough income that you don't have taxable income, which is true for most low-income people, there's no benefit. In fact, even in the spin from the finance minister where she talked about all of these people who no longer pay taxes, she was just recycling an announcement from the 2005 budget.
Okay, paying the debt. They say that a lot of this money is going to pay for the debt. Is that a benefit for British Columbians to have no debt?
No, not really. I mean, what matters in economic terms is what's your debt to GDP ratio. In fact, Carol Taylor herself admits that, as pretty well all economists do. And the debt to GDP ratio is going down. But even if you did what we were saying, which was to just admit the size of the surplus and spend it to meet pressing social needs today, the debt to GDP ratio would still go down. It just wouldn't go down quite as fast as it would otherwise.
So paying the debt is not the first choice that you would recommend?
Well, it's all about weighing costs and benefits of different options, right? So just to kind of get very practical about it, if you pay down debt, the savings is the money that you save in debt interest payments, which is about 5% for the provincial government. So you could say that paying down the debt has a 5% rate of return, if you will. But you contrast that with if you took that same money and put it into education or put it into housing, with everything that we know about the economic as well as social benefits of early childhood education and child care, education in general and post-secondary education, and what we know about the costs of homelessness. The argument we would make is that the rate of return of spending the money on those things is greater than the 5% rate of return of a debt payment.
What is the cost of homelessness?
Well, there's a huge cost of homelessness. I mean, it has costs to the healthcare system primarily. It has costs in terms of other social services. It has costs to the justice system. And this has actually been documented in research. And that's where there's so much irony here and why the budget was so disappointing, is that we actually spend more on services and costs for homelessness than it would to actually house them.
So it could be eliminated. Those other costs could be ameliorated if we put more money into social housing.
Absolutely. There's a tremendous false economy to not building the housing. And, I mean, the government has revealed itself to be just phenomenally ideologically pig-headed on this issue. That, there's certain issues where the Premier seems to have embraced a role for government, on First Nations, arguably, now on climate change, maybe literacy. But on this issue, he just refuses to have them just come in and build the housing. They just they're only willing to sort of leave it to municipalities and the private sector to address the fact that the stock of low-income housing is completely inadequate.
And some municipalities have offered some land. The city of Vancouver says they have 12 lots ready to be dedicated for social housing. However, what is required from the BC government to build those?
They need money. But let me put this concretely. We've long called in our solutions budgets that the government should build 2,000 units per year. The cost of 2,000 units is about of building that is about $400 million. They didn't do that, and instead they're spending about $500 million per year on a tax cut that nobody asked for. The finance committee went around the whole province asking for people's input. We went. Nobody, not even the business community, was asking for this tax cut. And yet they took all the money that they could have used to build that social housing and eliminate homelessness, and instead put it into a tax cut which, for an individual, as I mentioned earlier, it's chump change, but collectively takes our ability to do that off the table.